Inside Outer Limits is a regular feature on the Paranormal UK radio network. Hello everybody once again, and welcome to another edition of Inside Outer Limits radio show with myself, Chris Evers, the man from Outer Limits magazine, and of course my UFO royalty co-host, the one and only Mr. Phillip Mantle, the man from Flying Disc Press.
Good evening, Chris.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, mate. Everything's ticking over nicely. I can't complain.
I actually noticed a post there on Facebook earlier on, but some of the books you've got coming next year, and they should be some really good titles in there, Phil. There's some interesting stuff I'm looking forward to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I tried to limit myself, because there's only me, who runs Flying Disc Press. I tried to limit myself to 6 books per year, so every 2 months. But I've broken that rule, and I think I'm up to either 8 or 9 now. But that will have to end there. It's not just the time in preparing them and publishing. It's the time that you need to promote them that takes up most of it.
Yeah.
But there are some fascinating titles coming next year. One that I initially turned down earlier in the year, simply not because it wasn't a good book, simply I was just too busy. And it's called The Meadow Project, and it's by a chap called Trey Hudson. Trey is former military, career in all kinds of military, serving overseas. And he's head of a small team to investigate the area. The detective, the southern part of the small country. It's an area that I think was tiny, and Trey is an executive there. So that's done, it's ready. But it will be on next year before that. And also from the what interesting, the first book I mentioned, Trey, and people know my involvement with this. Well, Calvin signed a contract with a film producer, and the screenplay is done. It's ready to go. I've read it, and it will soon be made available to others. What is interesting is that the producer in question, I'm not going to mention his name just yet, had no involvement or interest in UFOs before getting involved with Calvin. But as soon as I mentioned this new book with Trey Hudson, he was straight on, and we have an offer on the table from the same gentleman. So that is, that was on the table before the book was actually finished. And he had one conversation with the author, and he said, I want it, and I'm bringing in a partner to do this. So we'll see how that goes. There are other interested parties as well, but it's nice to have these offers on the table.
Absolutely. So 2021 is going to be a lot more busier than 2020 for you, Phil.
It looks like it. And of course, those that listen to our show will know that not that long ago, a few months back, we interviewed a British filmmaker by the name of Charlie Parrish.
Yeah. But
Charlie lives and resides in Pasadena in California. Well, I spoke to Charlie just the other night, and if we remember from that conversation, Chris, Charlie is making what I would say is a groundbreaking production. I call it cinematic because I don't know the best way to describe it. It's so different, and it will probably turn out to be a series. It's based on the life and work of Dr. David Jacobs.
Yeah.
And Dr. Jacobs also has the archive of the late Bud Hopkins.
Yeah. And
Charlie has a deal to access all of the information in both archives. And so that what I was going to say, I can't give out any specific details, but the project that Charlie is working on is progressing. Brilliant. And what I can say is it could well be groundbreaking and totally different to anything we've ever seen. I know the James Fox production, The Phenomenon, is out now. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not going to comment on it, but it's got a lot of good press. But it's totally, Charlie's thing, I've seen clips of it, will be totally different to anything we've seen, Chris. What is interesting, it's a little story out. I hope I'm not stepping out of line here, but if you remember the late Bud Hopkins, anybody that knows him, if you ever read Bud's first book, Missing Time, if you haven't read it, shame on you. You should be forced to read it. But Bud actually got involved in abduction research when he went to his local liquor store over the road from where he lived in New York, same place he always went. And the chap behind the counter was a chirpy guy, I was chatting. Well, Bud went in one night and there was something wrong with this fella. He wasn't his normal self. So Bud, being a, kind and caring guy, asked what was the matter. And he told him about his alien encounter. It was that encounter that got Bud involved in alien abductions.
Yeah.
And Charlie has the tape recording of the interview with that particular chap from Bud's archives. So he has the audio recording of Bud's very first case.
Excellent.
Which I find fascinating. And the only problem is where Charlie lives, he doesn't have the room to house all the archive. He's got access to it.
Good.
But and this will make you laugh as well. This other thing will really make you laugh. I've been asked to appear in a short film. It's a 10-minute short film about UFOs invading, and the gentleman in question lives in Italy, although primarily he works out of the US. And there is a small scene in it where the people involved, the characters involved, contact a UFO researcher.
Yeah.
That UFO researcher is me. And they were going to get an actor to play it, but somebody in the production team said, well, why don't you ask Phillip himself if he'll do it? So, hey, presto, I will be acting as myself.
Well, I hope you're getting union rates, Phil.
Well, I jokingly told him he'll have to speak to my agent, which is my wife, Christine. And, so I have spoken with the guy who's making it, and we had a good chat, and I'm speaking to him and his colleagues tomorrow night as well. So
excellent.
It's a funny old world, is it not?
It's strange how things go around, isn't it? Really, and some things come back and hit us square in the face, and other things come back and we get quite a lot of enjoyment from them, and it's brilliant, really. It's a never changing, it's an endlessly changing facade that we have to put on to actually keep abreast of the latest information, so we can actually bring that out to people, and these things come back, and we can learn from them, we can share ideas, and again, what you're doing with the books, Phil, and I'm doing with Outer Limits magazine. Now, talking of books, as we have been just a few seconds ago, does our guest this evening have any books?
Hi. No, I don't have any books out. Yes, I've been working on other projects, but a lot of people have asked me plenty of times, why don't you release a book, Dave?
Let's introduce you properly.
Let's tell people who you are. We have a voice in the dark. We've just opened the cupboard and there he is. And,
he only comes out once a year, apparently.
The man with no name. We were having a joke before we went online about this gentleman's surname and how to pronounce it. Now, people will know that Uslop here in Yorkshire don't always pronounce. As Chris lives in Yorkshire, he lives in Hull. Space. Yeah. And I often laugh when I see some of the TV presenters pronounce this next town in West Yorkshire, and that's Harrogate, and they pronounce it Harrogate. But as far as I'm concerned, it's Harrogate. But so our next guest, he's not from Harrogate. He's from a city that, without which I would not have existed, because my mum and dad in Birmingham. After the end of the Second World War. They both moved there from different parts of the UK. My mum from Ireland, my father from Wales, and they met in Birmingham. So our guest this evening is a gentleman we've known for a long time, and it's Dave Hodrien. Or it should be pronounced Hodrien. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Dave.
Hey, both.
Well, for those that are not aware, Dave is the founder, I believe, of the UFO group. Sorry, the Birmingham UFO group. And I did have the pleasure of speaking in front of the group a few years back. But I'll let Dave, tell you more about himself rather than me tell it. So, Dave, yes. For those that don't know you, how did you get involved in UFO research? How did it all come about?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to take it right back to my childhood or from when I became an investigator?
Well, what sparked your interest, which then I would assume by that, led to your involvement.
In the end, absolutely. Well, I've always had an interest in the paranormal, not just UFOs, been interested in other aspects of the paranormal as well, ghosts and psychic phenomena, that sort of thing. And I just remember as a child reading lots of books on the subject, creeping myself out after dark, sitting there in the torchlight reading Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and stuff like that. And it just really, it went from there. I'd never had a sighting back then. I had a sighting. I had a sighting in 2009, but I never had a sighting until that point. But it just fascinated me, the idea that we could be being visited by other life forms, or that other life forms were interacting with the human race. And the more I read into the UFO subject, the more, shall we say, convinced I was that was a reality and that was something not to be laughed at. Just the sheer weight of cases on record and the amount of incredible evidence of so many witnesses from all around the world. It was absolutely fascinating to me. From about age 16, I started going to UFO conferences, and Phil, you would have been there at some of these, the UFO magazine conferences, the classics back in the day. And that's where I first started to see talks by ufologists, and it was just great just seeing that and hearing people talk about cases they'd investigated. And I always wondered back then what it would be like to be on the front lines of this subject and to speak directly with people who'd had these experiences. Interests stuck with me over the years, but it wasn't until 2007 that the creation of Birmingham UFO Group gave me, shall we say, a path into the world of active UFO investigation. I wasn't actually you mentioned I was the founder. I wasn't actually the founder of the group originally. It was actually started by another couple of chaps from up Quinton in Birmingham. I was one of the first members to sign on to the group, came across it online. And back then there was UFO Research Midlands. That was the closest one to where I lived. And that was a bit far out to travel to get to. But Birmingham UFO Group, they were going to start holding meetings in the centre of town. I thought, this is brilliant. This is close enough to get to. And it'd be really good to go along and just meet other people with a fascination in the subject, hear about their experiences maybe, et cetera, et cetera. So I started going along to the meetings. And it wasn't long before the original founders, named Craig and Mark, they realised I had a real passion for the subject, a real true interest in it. And they invited me to become the official investigator for Birmingham UFO Group, which I readily took on. So from that point onwards, I was investigating cases. It actually started with a fascinating case of a close encounter, multiple witness encounter in Kings Winford, North Birmingham, which we can go into more detail in a bit if you wish. And I decided the witnesses of this case were down there at the group, and I started talking with them about what they'd seen, and it was amazing to me. And I thought it'd be really good to go out there and go out to the actual location where it had taken place. So I spoke with Craig and Mark about this, and they said, do you want to put together a report for BUFOG on this? And I said, sure. So I didn't tell the witnesses I was going to do this, but on the night when we went out there to the location, I invited them all to one side at various points of the night and just spoke with them independently about what they'd seen. And it was very obvious to me that they'd all had a real experience. All the details matched up. The witness drawings were very, very close to one another in the match up. So it seemed like a very real experience. And I wrote that up as a case report, and that was the first official report that I released for the group.
That's fascinating, Dave, because I can see where you're coming from here, because it's very similar to how I began. I was always interested in the paranormal. I went to the spiritualist church and I read everything I could, which wasn't much I mean, I'm older than you, so going back, there wasn't that much around in your local library and at school library or whatever. And I remember reading von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, and I thought, wow, this really is something. And of course, like you, I wasn't. I beg your pardon for saying you were the founder. That's my mistake. But I went to the first ever meeting of the Yorkshire UFO Society, which was founded by brothers Mark and Graham Birdsall.
Yes.
And so I certainly wasn't the founder, but I was like you. I just wanted to learn more and got involved. And there was a case from very early on that I investigated along with Mark Birdsall, which was a landing case in a place called Normanton, that convinced me that whatever this subject was, like yourself, it was worthy of my time and energy.
Yes.
And so that's fascinating. And I dare say we will have crossed paths at some of those conferences
many
you
times.
mentioned.
I remember your talks back then, and being fascinated.
Well, I'm glad somebody did. You were the one, Dave. You were the one. But no, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, I did a presentation for what became Graham Birdsall's last ever conference, and he passed away the following year.
Yes.
But that year was Graham's 21st conference, so that was 21 years they've been doing them. And we actually started in Leeds. I helped back in the 80s. And so what I did, and Graham introduced me, and then I said, come here a minute. I mean, there was a packed audience. There must have been, I don't know, 700 or 800 people in the theatre, packed to the rafters. Graham didn't know this, but I had some pictures, some slides from the early days when he first began, and when I first began with him. And I showed them, and I said, you look at this theatre now with all the mod cons. This is how it all began. This path hasn't been easy for Graham. There's a lot of hard work gone in the meantime. Mm-hmm. And Graham's wife Christine was sat on the front row, and she was crying. Sadly, Graham passed away the following year. Yeah. But so I can identify exactly where you're coming from, Dave. I really can.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Phil, there's also something else that you and Dave have in common as well, and you've got an extensive collection of UFO-related items, and I also know that Dave has as well. He's got a massive collection of model greys.
Yeah.
I've got all sorts.
You collect craft as well, don't you, Phil? Yeah.
I do. I collect pretty much anything that. Yeah. I have to limit it now because I am literally running out of room. So I try and stick to small items.
Yes.
And usually ones that the wife doesn't notice, so long as she's not there when they arrive at the door. But I've even got stuff in the other room, and I've got stuff out in the garage as well that I forget all about sometimes.
Yes.
And a few years back, I actually got rid of a lot of it, but to my amazement, I have more now than I ever did. So there's no point trying to have a clear out. It's just.
I remember you doing the sale. Yeah, you were doing the sale, weren't you, with a load of pieces?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've just been. We're trying to decorate at the moment, and I'm under the threat of death when I go into the living room. If there's any UFO related memorabilia in there, I'm a dead man. But I joke with my wife. I said, well, I'll just wait while you're at work, and then I'll put them up on the wall. It's too late then.
Yeah, I've got a few pieces of art, and the biggest piece I got is a full life-size grey. So about 4 foot high. That spends most of its time up in the loft, but I bring it down for Halloween. I like to scare the trick or treaters with it.
Yeah, I've got one in a box in the garage. And I get just a little story.
Is that the one off Ray Santilli, Phil?
No, not there. But a couple of years ago, my wife and I were on holiday, and we were in an antique shop, and the chap's trying to sell us something. There's nobody else in, and he says, anything I can interest you? What you're looking for? He says, I've got everything you can think of. So I said, have you got a full-size alien? And he looked at me. And I said, I have. I've got one in my garage. And I thought, he didn't know what to say. So that kind of shut him up.
So I was just going to say, just to move the conversation on slightly here, you've had a long time involvement in the UFO community then, Dave. Where have you lectured, and what TV, radio appearances have you done?
Well, yeah, all over the place. I mean, taking it back a second, yeah, we were talking about how I became the chairman. That actually happened in 2009. They kind of passed on the runnings of the actual group to me, in addition to being the investigator. And ever since then, I've just basically kept it both going, which obviously is quite a lot of work. Yeah, it wasn't. It would have been soon after that, or around that time, that I started lecturing. I spoke at the International Irish UFO Conference by Betty Mailer back in the day. Mm-hmm. That was one of the first conferences I spoke at. I've spoken at most of the large-scale conferences around the UK, Glastonbury Symposium, Exopolitics, UFO Truth Magazine. I believe I spoke at one of the later UFO Data ones, perhaps. Just various ones around the UK. I haven't branched out international yet, but I'm looking for the chance, absolutely. So I'm always happy to do that. And I was actually in talks with speaking at a conference across in Nevada, but then obviously COVID happened, so that's all gone away for now. So,
yeah, that's closed down a lot of things, hasn't it, quite recently?
I was supposed to be speaking at Lapis, and which was actually a couple of days ago, I believe. I would have been speaking there, maybe even this weekend. That's been delayed until next year, and I was also going to be talking at Glastonbury and the symposium in August, but again, that's been pushed forward.
Yeah.
So so I get around. I've spoken on TV a number of times. Spoken on Richard Hall's Starship show on Sky, and a number of different documentaries. I'm a bit wary about how the media portray the subject, and I've been invited onto lots of different programs over the years by Channel 4 and everything. And a lot of the time, I watch those programs at a later date after turning them down, and then I'm glad that I had. So I'm very wary of how I branch out into that side of things. I very, very much enjoy talking on radio and podcasts like we're doing here, because it's just more of an open chat, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can anyone remember a TV show by a very obnoxious guy called James Whale?
Yeah.
I mean, he was awful. And he was so rude to his guests. I mean, he was just unbelievable. And they kept phoning me and asking if I'd go on, and I just refused. Yes. And they must have rung half a dozen times. So in the end, I said, "Well, I'll go on, yeah, but I'll just give you one little mention." She said, "What?" I said, "If he's rude to me, I'm going to punch him in the face." I said, "As simple as that. If he speaks to me like any of his other guests, I'm just going to punch him." They never phoned me again. I had no intention of punching him. It was just a ruse to make sure they never bothered me again, and it was awful. But you mentioned that first case there, Dave, that really got you up and running. Tell us a little bit more about it, because I remember that incident that I investigated that convinced me I wasn't wasting my time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I'd been convinced for a long time that the subject's real, but this was a pretty decent case to be going in with. In terms of one of the first cases to put down as a report, this was a good one. And it actually happened back in, would have been early 2009. 2008, yeah, which would have been a couple of months after the group had got started. So this had just recently happened, and it involved 4 witnesses in their early 20s. And they would often go to a place called Ridgewood in Kings Winford, which is a kind of triangular area of woodland. And they'd just go there and hang out in a clearing, sometimes get a fire going and just sit and relax. They might have a couple of beers occasionally. I didn't think that drugs or alcohol was anything to do with what happened here. I will put that out there. So I spoke with them in depth about what had taken place. And essentially they'd been out there, and it was about 11:30 at night. And the sun had set, obviously due to the time of year. It was fully dark. And Ridgewood is actually on a bit of a slope, and it overlooks the areas of Enville and Kinver off to the west. And they looked out that way, and they saw in the distance what they assumed was just a plane at first. It was just a mix of white and blue and red light at quite a vast distance. So, didn't think too much of it. But one of the witnesses, also named Dave, he was a bit intrigued by it. It just seemed to be a bit too low altitude to be a plane, and he kept tabs on it, and he just kept checking it, and he realised it was moving in their direction towards the woodland. So they were out over at the edge of the woodland, looking out over the edge of the slope at this thing approaching. As it got nearer, they realised it was just far too low down, and it also appeared to be silent. And it got closer and closer and closer, and they soon realised what it was. And what they described was an octagonal-shaped black craft with 4 white lights, and then a kind of either amber or red light at the centre. And it was completely silent, and it was hovering about 200 feet above them. They had a viewer kind of roughly alongside it, but as it approached the slope, it started to rise as the slope rose, and then it went overhead and came above the clearing where they were all sitting. And it basically seemed to slow down a moment at that time, almost like it was checking them out. It might have just been coincidence, but it then carried on across the woodland, and they ran through the woodland to keep an eye on it. And they reached the far side of the woodland over in the direction of Dudley off to the east, and they watched it disappear into the distance. They kept their eye on it all the time, and this was an extended sighting. They watched it for about 40 minutes, they reckon, in total. But most of that, it was at a distance, and it was moving around and moving left to right. Now, to anybody else, you'd see that, and you'd think it was just a helicopter in the distance, but they knew that it wasn't. Now, we never got any other calls in about that object off anybody else, but in speaking with them, it was very compelling, just the way that they talked about it, the incidental little details. One of them, when they ran through the woods, had tripped over and on a bramble and hurt his ankle, because he was so excited about seeing this thing. He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings as he ran through the dark woodland. And the drawings that they did were pretty much spot on, and they did those drawings completely independently with no warning that I was going to start asking him a load of questions about what they'd seen in any depth. There was slight variations, as you'll know, Phil, with multiple witness cases, you often get slight variations. So one of them said that it was a hexagon instead of an octagon, and one of them described the central light as a slight different colour to the other. But it was pretty obvious. There was enough clarity between the drawings to show that it was a real object.
I think if everything was identical, then you'd be worried.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah, that may raise suspicion, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, what amazes me and still intrigues me, the thing you said there, that you got no other calls about it. Again, yeah. Similarly with the first case that I really got my teeth into, it was a landing case here in Normanton, and it was a lady and her children. And, there's a motorway right next to where they live, either side. It's a busy place. And she's called Mrs. Westerman. I would believe she's no longer with us. But what puzzled her as much as the sighting was the fact that nobody else came forward. She lived in a housing estate. It was a lovely sunny day. Her children were playing out when they saw this. And she fully expected it to be on the local news that night or in the newspaper, and nothing. And I've featured that case in the local newspaper here a couple of times, and nobody's came forward at all. And she was amazed. It's almost as if, I know this is speculating, but as if to be involved in that incident, you had to be at that spot at that time. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, there is an interesting thing with that, isn't it? It tends to occur far more often than it should. That thing with it being in an area where it should have been seen by a lot of people. Yeah. Now, obviously, you could put some of that down to people just staring down at their mobile phones or whatever, or not paying attention, or not even looking up into the sky and missing something. If it's aerial, obviously, in your case, it was a landing.
But this was 1980. There was no mobile phones.
Oh, well, there we go. Yeah,
and no home computers as such. That's why the children were still playing out like I used to do. In fact, the ball game they were playing is a made-up game in this area. It's one that I used to play as a child as well. It's not got a name. We used to just call it sticks. But it was the same game, and she could not believe what she saw, and then B, that nobody else around her had seen it. And, and that's often stayed with me is that particular statement. On the other hand, we have, again, my involvement with Calvin Parker over this last couple of years. His encounter was in 1973. And since Calvin went public, and we published his 2 books, quite the opposite has happened. Lots of people have come forward for the first time and said, well, I saw it that night. I was out walking my dog, or we were out, for a drive, or I was driving home, or whatever. So it's just a puzzling aspect, something that makes me scratch my head. I don't know about you, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes they, perhaps show themselves to particular people for whatever reason, and other people are kind of sort of switched off to it. That extends to obvious kind of time distortion type elements that go on with contact cases, but there's all sorts of odd aspects to contact cases, and that's a particular fascination of mine, the contact phenomenon, which we can get into in a bit. In terms of multiple witness cases, though, we have had there's been quite a number over the years. Often, it's sort of 2 or 3 witnesses, but one particular one that springs to mind is it's a historic case I dealt with. It actually occurred back in August 1974, and with that it was one of the times where I released a case report, and other people found the case report online and came back to me. So it made it worthwhile releasing that case report, because it brought other witnesses out the woodwork. And it was basically a V-shaped formation of oval-shaped glowing objects that apparently travelled down the UK in an S-type shape. I was informed this by the first group of witnesses I spoke with, who were from Castle Vale in Birmingham, and somebody from the Solihull area. They got in touch with me and said they'd seen it at 9 years old back in 1974, and they were absolutely certain. And I met up with them, went through it, and it was the same. It was the same thing that they'd seen. And then a couple of years later, we actually had a case come in from Liverpool. The Liverpool case, again, it was a formation, and he said it happened in August 1973. But obviously, thinking back to something that happened decades ago, you may have easily got the year wrong. And I sort of said, could it have been August 1974? And he said, yeah, he wasn't absolutely certain of the year. And what he'd seen was instead of a V-shaped formation, it started as like the 5 side of a dice, but then the central object apparently moved forward, which would have made it look more like a V. And I'm absolutely convinced that these three sightings were of the same experience, but different groups.
That's amazing, because I don't know if I told Chris, but the Normanton landing case I mentioned, I don't know if it was this year or last year, I was interviewed myself by somebody. I can't remember who it was for the life in me, on a podcast. And I talked about that particular incident, but I didn't give out the family name, not for any reason. I just forgot. So it's Mrs. Westerman, and I got an email from a lady in New Zealand who listened to it. So somebody heard it, and she said, "I used to live in Normanton, but you didn't say the family name. Could you tell me who it was, please?" I said, "Yeah, it was a lady by the name of." Mrs. Westerman. She says, "I can't believe it. My best friend was called Westerman, but she's changed her name now. She's married, but she still lives in Normanton." So she emailed her and she said that was her. She was one of the children that I interviewed all that time back in 1980. So I got in touch with her via email. She gave me a statement, because I'm using this particular case and others in my one of my books that's coming out next year on UFO landings in the UK. And we were arranging to meet when COVID kicked off, but I got a little statement from her anyway. And I thought, that amazing. I'd run the case twice in the local newspaper. What I did one day, when they still used to use them, the old telephone directory, I got that out and I looked for every name of Westerman around this area, and I sent a letter to every one of them explaining, what I was looking for. I didn't get a reply from anyone. And so, hey presto, I do a little podcast, and a lady in New Zealand pops up and tells me who it was. But it is amazing, and like you were saying with that last chap, he wasn't sure if it was 73 or 74.
Yeah.
Again, with Calvin Parker's case, I found a UFO reciting report, a 2-page form that had been filled in by a police officer in Pascagoula, but he'd filled it in not in 1973. It was actually completed, I think it was in 1975, and he couldn't remember the exact date. He said around the 14th, 16th, but I'm pretty sure it was the same night as Calvin and Charlie's encounter on the 11th of October. So I think your reasoning's spot on there, Dave. I really do.
Yeah, there were so many similarities with that particular incident. It just made sense to me that it was the same objects, and the fact that he had the month and the year with it, and it was within 1 year of the other sightings. It seemed very likely it was the same thing, and that kind of led back to the whole fact that I'd been informed that these objects had been seen up north England, right down to Devon. Apparently, they performed a manoeuvre across the United Kingdom. And some of the things that were reported with that as well, because people listening to this may think, oh, it's just a formation of jets, isn't it? Yeah, disinformation. Except that the Solihull case, the second witness, he said that the objects actually stopped as they moved away. He's only 9 years old. And he was out playing cricket on this green, Camden Green in Solihull, and as the objects travelled away, they suddenly came to a halt in the sky. And then the central one started to do this weird vibrating type motion, and then suddenly shot straight upwards, and it was followed by the other 4 a second later, like they were following the initial one straight up. That leads back to the Liverpool case from a couple of years later, and he said they did exactly the same thing. But then, of course, there's many cases on record where these objects are seen to shoot up vertically at dramatic rates.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me also, I saw some strange lights on July the 23rd, 1984, and there were witnesses right across Yorkshire that particular evening, and I was still part of the Yorkshire UFO Society at the time, so Mark Birdsall and I got stuck into, and we had dozens of witnesses to it. Started out by you, Chris, out on the East Coast, came across West Yorkshire, out to York, and then turned and seemed to be heading back. I saw it over Leeds, and I was coming home from work that night when I saw it. And I met a friend a few years later. I didn't know him at the time, and he's actually going to be one of the speakers at Chris's conference in Hull. You notice I put the H on there. That was my posh way of saying Hull then. And he's a chap called Paul Laskov. And I met Paul at a UFO event. And he was a paramedic all his life, in the military to begin with, and then in Civvy Street. He's now recently retired, and has published his first UFO book as well. And I remember when I first got friends with Paul, we were chatting, and I said, I asked the question, have you seen anything? Oh yeah, I saw these lights over Leeds, July the 23rd, 1984, and this was years later, so he was another one added to the list. And it's a funny old world, is it not, how these things correlate sometimes. It really is.
Yeah, one of the things you have become known for, Dave, is your work on the contact field.
Yes.
In fact, so much so, you're known as one of the UK's leading specialists on the subject of ET contact. What are the most difficult things to handle when investigating these kind of cases?
Cool. Yeah, it's a very dark side to the subject. Is the
what I'd say? What is the definition of a contact case?
Okay, so contact essentially is when the person has some kind of interaction with occupants. So whether that be, it would usually involve a physical sighting of the beings. You may class a kind of a distant sighting of some kind of entities outside an object as contact, although it's not strictly contact. It's more of a sighting of. But I would say that definitely abductions and visitations. So that's where beings appear in the proximity of the individual, sometimes with direct communication, sometimes absolutely no communication involved.
Yeah, so a sighting then similar to the Lenny Zamora case, whatever they call him, the policeman from America, where he saw beings running either from or to the craft, I believe.
Yes, yeah, I could say that. I would say that would probably be classed as contact, because he's seeing more than just an object.
So what you're saying is up close and personal?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But the abduction phenomena and the contact phenomena, I should say, not just abduction, because not all contact cases involve abduction. It's absolutely fascinating to me. I think what it shows, I think it's a window into what's going on with this subject. Because once you get past the idea that these objects are real, and if you believe, which I do, that they involve other intelligences, non-human intelligences, then you have to. The next question, obviously, is what are they doing here? What are they doing here for this period of time? Spending all that time, what's going on? And I believe that the contact phenomena gives us a view into that. And there's a number of definite repeated agendas that appear to come out through cases from all around the world. I've dealt with over 300 contact cases now, and I deal with cases. Obviously, over half of those have been in the UK, because Birmingham UFO Group based in the UK. But I deal with cases as far wide as Australia, so from all around the planet. Well, I've had people come across from abroad specifically for me to investigate their case, and sometimes for them to be regressed as well. I do work with a hypnotherapist. It's quite a controversial subject in itself, but I believe that in some cases it can be used to retrieve lost memories relating to contact experiences.
Well, I'll just interrupt there, because when I was part of BUFOG, they had a moratorium on the use of regressive hypnosis.
Yeah.
So as a result, never got involved. But again, I'm sorry to keep mentioning this chap's name, but it's just coincidence. But
yeah,
I go back to Calvin Parker. And when Calvin and Charlie were pulling up to go fishing the night of their encounter, as they're pulling in, they passed a car parked, and there was a courting couple in this car. And Calvin afterwards could remember the make and the model of the car, even the tag on it. They have a tag to tell you which state it came from, but he couldn't recollect the license plate. So in 1993, after another period of missing time, Calvin was hypnotized by the late Bud Hopkins.
Yes.
And under that regression, he remembered the license plate number. And what he did, and he didn't tell me this straight away, it took him a while for him to tell me. At one point, he hired a private investigator to find out who owned that car at that time in 1973. And he found them. It was a couple. The gentleman had sadly passed away, but the lady was still alive. She was living in a nursing home, and she only agreed to speak to Calvin on one condition, and that was that her name was kept out of it. So Calvin went and spoke to her, and she confirmed they'd seen this thing, and they took off like a bat out of hell.
Yes, because
Calvin said he could remember seeing the car shooting off. And he even made eye contact, he thought, with the woman in the back window. And so if you go to other incidents, I think for me the jury's out on the use of hypnosis. But it did work in Calvin's case. And what is interesting, I'll tell people this because nobody's read it yet, is that particular incident, he's featured in the screenplay of Calvin Parker. So I'm sorry to interrupt, Dave, but...
No, it's fine. No, I mean, there's a good example there. Yeah. That's showing that regression can work in certain cases. Now, obviously, it's also been scientifically proven that it's possible to implant false memories into people while in a regressive state. So you have to be very, very careful with it. But I've dealt with, and I've sat in on about 15 or so regressions. It's not all the time. A lot of the time the individual doesn't want to go for regression or can't be regressed. There are lots of different reasons. But where regressions have taken place, in the majority of those, I'd say that they've come back with additional details. There are also screen memories, of course. I mean, you'll both be very familiar with that, as will many of the listeners. That's where and I'm actually writing I'm in the process of, I've written recently a new lecture on the screen memory phenomena, which I'm going to be speaking at online, various places quite soon. But it's a particular aspect of the contact subject that's really interesting to me. And this is where the beings, or sometimes even their craft, can be kind of masked, so the individual will remember something else, be an animal or a family member or a clown. They might remember the inside of the craft as a hospital, or even something somewhere else familiar to them, like their own house. And this happens with extreme regularity. But under regressive hypnosis, you can sometimes actually break past that screen memory. So I've dealt with cases where the person consciously remembers the screen memory, but under hypnosis, they describe a grey, or they start to break past it. It's absolutely fascinating. And sometimes they'll even say stuff like, it looks fake, it looks like a mask, like their mind is actually breaking past what they've been told that it is, and they're seeing it for what it really is. And that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, there was a period, wasn't there, where the face of an owl was alleged to be the screen the screen memory of.
It's quite common now.
Yeah.
I've dealt with a number of cases where they've described that exact thing to me. So, and it's usually staring them right in the face. So I've spoke with a number of contactees over the years who said that on repeat occasions, and some of them I spoke with before the film The Fourth Kind came out. I'm aware that the abduction-themed horror film The Fourth Kind actually made reference to that. It was based on the contact phenomena quite heavily, and a lot of the ideas of it went into that, and including the owl as a screen memory.
Didn't Whitley Strieber mention owls as well, like in Communion?
I think you did, Chris. Yeah.
He had a number of different screen memories. He'd see a robot. They appeared as a robot to him. They appeared as an owl. There was a number of different screen memories that he saw, insects and that sort of thing, that he'd have phobias of.
So Phil mentioned a moment ago, Dave, about Calvin talking with this witness, this female witness. She would speak to him on the guarantee that he wouldn't mention a name or anything. Now that's how do you deal with witness confidentiality? Because that is a serious thing, isn't it, to get people to talk to us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and a lot of the time, I'd say 4/5 of the time, the individuals don't really want their personal details going out with it. And I think this essentially points towards it being real experiences, because if they wanted to be known, to be in the public limelight with this, if they were doing all this for fame and fortune, then they'd want people to know their name, and they'd want people to know where they were and that sort of thing. But most of the time they don't want those details, and I will ask them, is it okay to use your name in the report? Sometimes they might go with their real first name. Other times I might make up a completely fabricated name for them. And sometimes it goes to the point where they don't even want to say the town where they live. So I might say something like South England, or even an entire country like France.
It's like the book I mentioned, Chris, that I'm going to publish, the Meadow Project. They call the area, they've given it the nickname of the Meadow, and they will not divulge where it is. Even the photographs in the book, there's one where they're in their car driving into the meadow, and there was actually a road sign within the trees that they hadn't noticed. So it was only when we put in the book together, they said, "Oh, Phillip, I've got to black that sign out, or they might know where it is." To me, it was innocuous. I could not figure out what country it was, never mind whereabouts. But I'm not a resident of the US, so they did that with a couple of things. So you couldn't find them.
One of the some of the things that we have been asked in the past, I know I've been asked it, about what are the most difficult cases or the things that you have to deal with as an investigator. Now, confidentiality is one of those things, but I'm going to slightly change this, Dave. What have you ever had a funny thing happen in a case that you found a little bit interesting?
I got a brilliant one for you.
What do you mean by funny? You mean funny, hilarious, or
you mean amusing?
Hilarious, amusing, not strangely funny.
Obviously. I mean, we don't have a conversation to get to. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are many aspects of the contact subject that are, very serious, and it affects people's lives. Yeah. And when you're an investigator and you speak with people, you see it all on TV, or you see it get put out on these documentaries, and they behave like it's a bit of a joke, and little green men come to get them and everything.
Yeah.
The reality is, it breaks people's lives apart. I've dealt with people who've got long-term depression with this. I've dealt with people who have lost relationships, they've lost their partners and family because of what's happening to them. And seeing that firsthand is very difficult sometimes, and that's the hardest part about going and speak. Really, it stays with you, that sort of stuff, when you see that firsthand from people, and it brings home the reality of the subject and what they're going through. But yeah, in terms of to change the mood a bit, an amusing case, yes. Okay, so a number of years ago, I can't remember when it was, probably about 2012 or 13 or something like that. I got a case in from I can't remember whether it was in Birmingham. I think it was just on the outskirts of Birmingham. But essentially, there's so many cases dealt with over the years. They'd come across some weird footprints in the back garden. It had been snowing, and so it was winter time, of course. And they'd gone out there and they'd found these odd-looking footprints across the snow, and they couldn't identify them. So they'd sent me some photographs and everything. So I was looking online, looking at different animal tracks, trying to work out what it could be. And it was essentially kind of two smaller round area and then a sort of larger kind of pad below it. And it was very odd. It looked like a kind of two-toed being or something. And they were quite sizable. They weren't massive, but they weren't really small like a kind of cat's paw prints. They were bigger than that. Yeah, we were looking around and everything. I was trying to think what this could be, and they sent me a later photo where the snow had begun to thaw, and I finally realised what it was. And what it was their pet cat had been sitting out in the snow, and it was the cat's backside and its two front paws. And essentially what happened is, because it had melted away the snow more, its paw prints from where it had walked to new locations, obviously cats tread quite lightly, don't they?
Yeah.
And because of the falling of snow, it had covered that over. So the only things that were left were these big areas where it had been sitting for a period of time and melted away the snow.
I have visions of, do you remember the stories from the 1800s of the devil's hoof prints
Yeah, it was very
all
like
over
that.
the southern area of the UK? I had visions of you going to say something like that.
maybe that was a cat back then, who knows? Yeah, but that was identified in the end, and yeah, rather amusing when we discovered what it actually was in the end.
Brilliant. So, obviously, we're all here we're talking about the subject, UFOs. What have you found out, Dave? What is the most regular type of craft seen by people? In your opinion, of course.
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to go with kind of the most regular thing seen is a glowing light after dark, but obviously that's not really seeing it. It's at a distance. It's after dark. It could be anything, In terms of seeing an actual shape, triangular craft are quite common, and also spheres probably a bit more common than dome discs. Dome discs and discs still occur, still get sightings of discs, but it's more often than not spheres. But then you have to take into account that some of those could be mundane explanations, like silver-coloured balloons drifting in the sky that are being misinterpreted. Yeah. So this is the problem with the flying triangle thing. So flying triangles, obviously, some people believe that maybe they're a top secret military project. I personally don't, because not only do they express the same characteristics as the other types of craft reported, but I've actually dealt with contact cases involving flying triangles where people have been abducted and seen greys involved with flying triangles. I'm going off topic there a bit, aren't I? Back to what a flying triangle might or might not be. If somebody's seeing it after dark and they see 3 points of light up in the sky, their brain may interpret that as a single solid object, and we're looking at a solid black object with a light at each corner. And in actual fact, it's 3 independent things. And I've had some cases in where it's turned out to be, say, for example, 3 Chinese lanterns. And I'm more than happy to go back to witnesses and tell them where it's something mundane. Yeah. There are all sorts of things up there, some of which people are not very familiar with. So even though they're fully purchasable in shops and online, there's very few people who know what a solar airship is, for example. And a solar airship essentially is a 10-meter long black balloon, cylindrical shaped, that in hot weather The air heats up inside it, and they launch them up into the sky. You tether it like you would a kite. But sometimes the tether can actually break, and then it'll drift across the sky. And I've actually had cases in where people have described seeing a cylindrical-shaped UFO with flashing rainbow-coloured lights along it. And I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. And then they said, I've got it on video. I was like, have you? Amazing, brilliant. Can I see the footage? Yeah. So they sent me through the footage, and what it was a solar airship reflecting the sunlight, and it was the sun's glare catching it as it turned, making it look like flashing rainbow-coloured lights along it. So that shows how, if you don't know what a thing looks like, you might interpret it as a craft, and it can sound, to all intents and purposes, like a stunning sighting of a solid object of some kind, and it can be something completely mundane. So you have to be very careful, and I'm always aware of that. I like to keep my feet on the ground with the subject while being open-minded enough to believe it's actually going on and real at the same time.
So if somebody was going to come to you then, Dave, and they'd say to you, all right, mister, you believe you believe in little green men coming from Zeta Reticuli, they're coming to visit us, etc., etc. What is the best evidence that you could present to those people to prove that this subject is real? And that what cases would you bring forward, or testimonial evidence to prove
in terms
the
of
case?
Yeah, I mean, in the Travis Walton abduction in America, Snowflake, Arizona, that's an absolutely stunning case for the contact reality. I mean, that's obviously one of the I'd say one of the most impressive ones on record, due to the fact that they all took lie detector tests and passed them, numerous people, and they had no reason really to. And they've stuck to a story over the years, and the recent, well, I say recent, it's been out for a number of years now. The documentary Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, is absolutely stunning.
Just so you're actually aware, Dave. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
The lady behind that, Jennifer Stein, she's actually speaking at the Outer Limits magazine conference next year.
Oh, brilliant.
If it all goes ahead, which I'm hoping by August of next year, it'll all be going ahead. So just so you're aware of that, in case you want to pop along.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that case is absolutely stunning. But there's lots of other very, very good cases on record with contact. Talking about classic cases, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. Yeah, absolutely mind blowing. There's so many aspects to that case, from the odd slimy material that they found on them, that they tested, from the fact that they independently regressed them and spoke with them independently, and the details all matched up, and they remembered similar things from being aboard and what happened aboard. Absolutely stunning. But it's the sheer weight of cases which really is the compelling evidence for the subject. It's the fact that you can get people of all different backgrounds, many of which who aren't interested at all in UFOs, and yet they'll see the same things. I've dealt with cases involving children, 5-year-old kids, who haven't watched X-Files or haven't had their brains corrupted by UFO lore or anything like that, and they've seen greys, and they've described seeing greys. And I've dealt with cases from Australia, from France, Germany, Switzerland, everywhere. And the same aspects come out again and again, and not just aspects we should see on TV. So everybody says, okay, the archetypal view of an alien is a grey with the big black eyes. Everybody knows what one of those look like. Well, to some extent, yes, maybe a lot of adults who aren't interested in the subject may have come across that, seen it on TV, maybe into the various films that have come out on the subject, that sort of thing. But the fact of the matter is that there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases where they're all reporting these beings, and some of those people have never really looked into the subject or had an interest in it, and yet they still describe them. And it's not just that, there's little details that come out time and time again in cases, and I know this from actively investigating hundreds of cases, and you see the little details that come out time and time again, like the way that the beings will stare into a person's face up close to calm them down, and then they'll get a sense of calm come over them, like they're telepathically calming them down if they start to get stressed out. Or sometimes they'll put their hand on the top of their head, and a sense of calm will flow through them. And I've heard that of completely different people with different backgrounds. That's the sort of details that you won't see on X-Files, you won't see on mainstream television to do with the contact subject, and yet it still happens.
Yeah, it's quite interesting what you mentioned, what you said a moment ago about children not being subject to seeing things like the X-Files and movies and things. It's quite interesting how the phenomena itself has come into our modern life, really. You know, as you said, we all know what the alien grey looks like with the almond-shaped dark eyes, etc. And you know, there were even bands that are named after. Well, the UFO was an American band. I remember that. I'm sure Phil can remember some. And me and Phil before have discussed like Hot Chocolate, and no doubt about it. That song, you know, we've had articles about that in Outer Limits magazine, and how it's ingrained into video games. Now,
it's in popular culture.
Exactly.
Full stop. But it's certainly in the West. There is no way of escaping it. But what, of course, people tend to forget as well is that there is a high percentage of these incidents that get reported that don't report the little grey guys.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They report something completely different.
Yes.
And this is not just a sales pitch, but it was something that was reminded me when I was writing UFO Landings UK, because in there is quite a mixture of entities, we'll call them, for want of a better word, that are seen. Yeah. And I remember, I don't know if it was the 1980s or the 1990s, there was an American researcher who wrote a piece in the MUFON UFO Journal, basically saying that if a case didn't involve the little grey creatures, then it should be dismissed, because only the little grey creatures are the aliens. The rest is, well, you know, chaff, is nonsense. And I thought, well, I can't agree with that.
Yeah, fully disagree.
And I won't mention his name, but he's disappeared from the scene.
Yes.
But it is in popular culture. And we can't escape it. And
some aspects,
flying
saucers and great.
I think those parents who don't show their children X-Files ought to be reported. What's wrong with them?
Well, the reason I brought all that up, Phil, was simply because our guest this evening, he's going to he's going to put in his little two-penny worth into the popular culture with UFO Wave. Do you want to tell us about that, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So UFO Wave is a new card game that I've developed that's entirely themed on the UFO subject. And it's something I've been working on for a number of years.
Dave. Are there any greys in it?
Yeah.
That's okay then, but we'll allow this to continue.
Yeah,
and there is greys.
Is it a card game that I'd lose money at?
It depends if you wanted to bet on it. It's a competitive card game, so yes, you could bet on it if you wanted to. It's a competitive card game for 1 to 6 players. It's suitable for both adults and kids. My 9-year-old daughter has played it and quite enjoys it. It covers UFO lore in great depth. I believe it's one of the most authentic portrayals of the UFO subject to ever be released in board or card game. We've taken a kind of comedic edge with it, so it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's got nice cartoon artwork, and the artwork's actually been drawn by a contactee from America who's done the artwork for me. I've just launched the game today, believe it or not. It's crazy coincidence. Most of today, since this morning, I've been releasing the official website for the game. I've been releasing the Instagram, the YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitter page. It's been absolutely crazy number of hours.
So give us the website address, Dave, before you go.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Of course, yeah. So the official website for the game is www.ufowavegame.com.
All one word.
Yeah,
okay.
UFO Wave Game. On that, you'll be able to find a superb animated advert for the game. There's an introduction about the game from myself. There's a merchandise store. So we've got a merchandise store already live where you can get lots of clothing and other accessories featuring various artwork of the game. And that's going to help towards where we want to go with this. And where we want to go with this is Kickstarter. So Kickstarter is a crowdfunding website. So obviously me as an individual, I don't have the money to buy thousands of copies of this. And you need to buy a lot of copies of it to bring down the manufacturing cost to a reasonable level. So if I was to order just one copy of the game, it would be insanely expensive. So via crowdfunding, via the Kickstarter website, I hope that over the coming months, people will get an interest in the game and want to back it when it releases on Kickstarter next year. And when that happens, the funds will be collected, and then it will be manufactured and sent out to everybody who's backed it. For those who aren't already au fait with with Kickstarter. But it's a resource gathering card game in which you play as an alien species, so you actually play as the Greys, or as 5 other different races: the Nordics, reptilians, mantids. There's alien hybrids in there, and also shadow beings. So for those of you who've got an interest in the concept subjects, those will all be familiar with you. You're going to be fighting against humans, including the military and the men in black, who are out to stop you and thwart you from performing a number of activities, including abductions, animal mutilations, crop formations, etc. So every aspect of the game has been focused on the UFO subject, and it covers content that I believe has never been put out in the game before.
Sounds great, Dave. You know the Kickstarter thing. What type of, as an individual who would like to participate, how much it cost me?
Okay, so what will happen is at the point when the game gets launched, and if you subscribe to the website, you'll be kept updated. Because
I've already done that, Dave.
I've got a blog on there. I'll keep you up to date with, because in the coming months I need to look into the manufacturing side of things and work out how who's going to manufacture it and when and etc. Once it's all down and I'm ready to launch, what will happen is a page will go up on the Kickstarter website and everybody will be informed that it's gone live on Kickstarter. From that point on, there'll be a period of time where people can check the preview page and can click on that to be notified of the actual launch date. From the launch date, there's a period of time, usually between 2 to 4 weeks, where people will go and back the game, and there'll be lots of communications going on around that time. If you go and back the game, you'll be paying for it what you would if it was in the high street. You'll be paying for it normal price. You'll be paying in advance of the manufacturing of it, of course, but your money's completely safe. If not enough people back the project, it essentially fails and it can't be manufactured. So enough people need to back it. There needs to be enough interest in both the UFO and card gaming communities for it to be a success. So I'm looking for everybody to go and check out the page. If you like what you see, get involved in what's coming with that. I've done all this as a labour of love. I'm not in any way trying to sort of make $1 million out of this or anything like that. In the same way that I run Birmingham UFO Group, it's just done because of my interest in the subject. And I just thought it'd be nice to get a game out there themed on the UFO subject entirely.
Are you a gamer?
Yeah, I've always been an avid board and card gamer as well as video games. So I actually did a lecture on UFOs in video games a number of years ago. It's one of the lectures that I can give. So I've delved into that side of things.
I mean, personally, I think it's a great idea, Dave. Anything that keeps the subject in the public eye, through whatever medium that may be, I think it's a great idea. I'm the same with you. When I publish some of these books, I with the best one in the world, I'm not convinced that they'll make a profit. Yeah. It's because I've just believed that they should be out there for them to be accessed. Yeah. And like I said, I've already registered on your website this afternoon. So I personally wish you every success with it.
Thank you very much.
And it's going to be Dave for that, absolutely.
It's going to be an interesting number of months ahead. I'm going to be releasing various videos between now and the Kickstarter date, including play tests. It's going to be sent out to review. I've got a number of prototype copies that are going to go out to reviewers to review, and the videos will go up on the site. So there's plenty coming in the coming months with this. But yeah, get involved, check it out.
Dave, might we see you on Dragon's Den? How about that?
I'm already past that stage. I've already gone beyond that because I've already kind of essentially built the prototype of the game and got all the artwork done. So we're way ahead with this project already, and it is happening. I just hope that enough people back it and there's enough interest to make it a reality. And that'd be great.
Now, normally, Dave, just changing the subject slightly once again, normally we like to keep the conversation, a bit light and a bit. We like to have a laugh and a joke and stuff like that. But I want to talk to you now about animal mutilations, because I think that's another area that you have an interest in. So, what do you think's going on with this?
I personally believe, and I mentioned mutilations they're actually in the card game. It's been dumbed down. There's no gore or anything in the game or anything. As I said, it's a quirky cartoon, but they are in there because it's a valid aspect and part of the UFO subject, I believe. I think it's definitely related to the UFO subject. I think there's enough cases on record where people have seen UFOs and then discovered mutilations shortly afterwards. There's also a very definite cover-up going on with the mutilation subject. Now, what happens with this is obviously it appears to be parts removed from animals, and then they'll find the dead carcasses, like they've been kind of left there or put back there, maybe even on purpose. Whatever happens with it, they don't.
Sorry, Dave. Just before you tell us about that, describe some of the animals, if you can, that have actually been. Because I know up in the Bridlington area where Paul Sinclair is, he's had porpoises washed up on the beach at Flamborough Head there, at Bempton, where he's had. Parts of the jaw have gone, and I think eyes have gone as well, if I remember correctly. If I've got that last bit wrong, I apologise.
No, that's correct.
And I do know that they go on all over the world. So just tell us some of the animals that can be involved.
Sure. Yeah. Well, a lot of the time it's livestock, because obviously that's shall we say, easy targets. Yeah. There's just fields full of animals out there. So it happens a lot with cattle, sheep, and horses. There are also other cases where other sort of lesser livestock like pigs, etc. There's cases on record. There's cases of house pets, dogs and cats being found. You mentioned the porpoises, cases with even with mice, believe it or not.
I remember Tony Dodd years ago talking about mice being involved with that as well. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there was a big load that they found badgers, foxes, and mice all in one place. Now, it's a very disturbing part of the subject, and and if it is, as I believe, to be linked with the subject, I believe that this is probably one of the reasons why the cover-up is still going on to this day around it. Because if you go full, and I know we're shifting the topic now into cover-up, but if you go full disclosure with this, you have to talk about the darker aspects of the subject, the abductions phenomena, the animal mutes, etc. And if that's a real part of the subject, then they'll be held accountable to that. The next question that comes out of everybody's mouths is, what are they doing here? And then if that is going on, then they'd say, well, can you stop it? And they'd have to say, no, we can't. And I don't think anybody would accept that. It would cause a lot of panic and a lot of concern and a lot of distrust of the government. So I don't see that. We're moving off topic. Sorry. Let's get back onto the mutilations thing. Now, the problem with the mutilations is, again, misidentification. So there's known bacterial elements in nature which, if an animal naturally dies, natural causes, then it can be eaten away by this bacteria in certain parts of it around the lower jaw and our eyes, and of course predation as well. Yeah. The problem is that some of these mutilation cases have been discovered very soon after the animal has apparently passed on. Yeah. So not enough time for it to decay in that manner. Sometimes, and some of the markings are kind of surgical type precision, almost looks like laser cutting tools. There are even some cases on record where they've actually had sort of burnt flesh, and it looks like some kind of laser has been used on the animal. There's very little blood, hardly any blood in the surrounding areas, no footprints or anything to or from the carcass. Look, essentially like it's been placed back down, potentially picked up, taken elsewhere, killed, bits removed, put back. Maybe it's done in the actual field itself, on the ground. Who can say? There's not many cases, if any, where people have actually witnessed a mutilation taking place. Yeah. Now, a very, very dark part to this subject is, of course, the fact that there have been a number of cases where dead people have been found with the same markings on them.
There was one famous one, wasn't there, from Brazil, if I remember correctly?
Yes. Yeah. And they express, they seem to have the same markings on them as it's been seen with these animals, and the same bits sort of removed. And you could say maybe that's misidentification, but there's some cases where it doesn't appear to be the case. Now, if that really is going on and really is a part of the subject, then that's something that they'd never want to disclose with the wider public. And I believe that's why there's a cover-up going on with the mutilations, and there is actually a cover-up. There's particular experts who look into the mutilation field in the same way that I focus on the contact field, and they've gone looking for autopsy reports on animals that have been found mutilated, and they've hit a brick wall. Essentially, most of the time they'd be able to get those autopsy reports completely freely, but in these particular cases, they hit a brick wall with it, and they won't allow them to see the details. And that shows you straight away that somebody's stopping them from seeing that information for a particular reason, the very essence of a cover-up.
So,
I think that. Sorry, yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry.
It's all right, Dave. Go ahead. I'll come back to you in a moment.
I was going to say that that's in a way proof that there's something nefarious going on with the mutilation subject. Because if it was natural and it was normal predation or just decay of the animals, why would they have any problem in releasing that?
Have you actually dealt with any of these yourself? Any mutilation cases? I don't know. Is it David Caton who used to be quite involved with the subject?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe he's still involved. He's come and spoken at BUFOG, David. Good friends with him. He essentially, because we're in Birmingham, obviously it's right in the middle of the country. There's not that much there is farmland around the outskirts of Birmingham and everything, but there's only been one case that's ever come our way of the group so far, and it was a case from down in Devon. I believe it was 2016. It's on the website. The majority of the cases I investigate get turned into detailed case reports where I put together all the evidence for that case. So I talk about the testimonial side of things. I include all witness drawings. I include where I can maps and photographs, all the evidence all together gathered, because I believe that every case, whether it's just a simple light in the sky or a close encounter with something, is worthy of attention and should be given credence.
Yeah.
So they go out on the website, and there's literally hundreds of case reports now on the Birmingham UFO Group website. I believe I'm probably one of the only ufologists in the country who's actively doing this on a regular basis at the moment. So I spend a lot of my time documenting these cases in great depth and then releasing them into the public via the website. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that pays off and get other witnesses come out, and a lot of the time they just sit there year after year. But some of the repeat cases where people have had repeat experiences, which happens with contact quite a lot, it's actually quite common, that is. They'll use the report as a sort of diary. So if something else happens to them, they might get back in touch with me and say something else took place last night, and I'll go and add it to their report.
So why do you think?
But yeah, back to the mutilation case a minute before we lose track. Yeah, so it was a case down in Devon where the gentleman involved had come across a dead sheep in a field, and he thought it looked suspicious. It appeared to have sort of certain wounds in certain areas and this something. And he sent through some very graphic colour photographs he'd taken of the animal. I looked into the case and everything, and examined the pros and cons for it being a mutilation case. And I also spoke with Mike Freebury, who's another mutilations expert, and myself and Mike both concluded that it was probably down to natural predation and not a mutilation. And the animal appeared a bit bloated, which probably means it had been there for a number of days, and the bits that were removed were probably taken away by other animals, rather than an actual case. But there are many cases on record. It is still going on. It's very rarely reported. You won't hear about it on the UK news.
That was what I was just going to ask you. Why are these not reported more regular on the news, on the national news, the local news? Is that all pointing then to signs of a cover-up of the subject?
It is sort of, especially regarding mutilations. But to be fair, the amount of cases going on all the time with this subject, whether it be sightings or contact cases, the news would be absolutely flooded with stuff non-stop. Yeah, there are certain newspapers who will occasionally release reports certain cases and see the light of day. Quite often, where the witness is being kind of quite vocal about their experiences and has maybe gone to the paper directly. There are many cases that never see the light of day. You could say that that's just disinterest, in the same way that the crop formations likely still going on, but you don't. Back in the day, they were all over the news all the time. New crop circle. Wow, just get it on the news. And now it's hardly ever on the news. It's hardly ever talked about anymore. Now, many people, myself included, believe that the majority of crop formations are going to be art projects done by groups who are doing it on purpose, and I believe that's why they've been slowly getting more and more complex over the years. However, I believe there's a reality to the crop formation phenomena linked with the UFOs. So I think it is still linked, and there certainly appears to be a military interest in crop formations, because quite often, and they've captured this on camera numerous times, you've got black unmarked military helicopters will turn up in the area where a crop formation has appeared. And why on earth would the military care about an art project that somebody's going to put in the field? So you have to ask yourself these things.
So taking all this into account then, why and how do you think the cover-up actually began? Not only of crop circles, but animal mutilations, and the subject itself, really. Why do you think it all began?
Well, I'm going to go back classic here with the Roswell, New Mexico incident. I believe, as many do, that was the start of the cover-up, and the cover-up began across in the States with that crash. Now, that's not to say that was the first UFO incident to ever occur. Of course not. UFOs have been seen many times before that. There have probably been landings and crashes even before that point. But that one went out into public eye. And, of course, they first put out that one had crashed. They said, yeah, we've got a flying disc come down. Probably revealed it in the paper. I mean, wow. And then obviously covered it up with the weather balloon story. The amount of evidence they've got that was a cover-up and that it wasn't a weather balloon or Project Muggle or any kind of balloon is absolutely astronomically big. There's about 300 people who've gone on the record. You've got deathbed testimonies of people, who'll describe an egg-shaped craft about Volkswagen, several dead greys, and one still alive. And the amount of cases, the amount of testimonial evidence they've got towards that far outweighs anybody saying, "Oh yeah, it was definitely a weather balloon and it's definitely scripts and whatever." So I certainly believe that was a crash of a craft that came down at Roswell, and I believe they covered it up. They would have done it initially just to see what they had and to keep a lid on it until they understood it more. When they realised the implications of it, and there are numerous implications of that, and of having that under their control, they put the lid down on it further, and it's remained ever since. I believe the cover-up was then spread out worldwide from America to other countries who are essentially in agreement with them behind the scenes. I believe there are select groups within our military and other military around the world, the MOD, CIA, etc., who are fully aware of the reality of the subject and are keeping it hidden from the majority of the planet. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that.
Yeah, the strange thing is, though, we all talk about disclosure. We all want disclosure. Or was it Operation Right to Know, Phil, back in the day?
Mm-hmm. It was in the 80s. They were literally outside the White House with banners. And what tends to happen with the so-called disclosure movement is it goes around in cycles.
It does, yeah.
It's only when old duffers like us have been involved so long that you realise. I mean, I remember when I first got involved, Timothy Good released Above Top Secret. I remember speaking to Tim, and he was adamant that the government, I don't know who the government was, I'm not quite sure, were going to release details imminently. And of course, I didn't hold my breath because it never came. Then we had Operation Right to Know, they thought that, and then it goes, and now you have, it's now called disclosure. It's just the same thing, with a different name. And I would just say, don't hold your breath. I really would.
Definitely, yeah.
One of the reasons, let's just, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dave.
Yeah, you go.
But let's say that we have made first contact, however that may be. It's irrelevant at the moment. Who would you trust to release that information to the world at large? Would you trust the current president of the US? Would you trust the Secretary General of the United Nations? I don't even know who it is. Would you trust the Pope or some other religious leader, or an organisation? And the fact is that whoever released it, there would be a number of people instantly wouldn't believe them. And then there's other parts of the world, of course, that don't have the kind of technology that we in the West have, so they would never hear the message anyway. So, so they'll be totally unaware of it.
Yeah.
So, one of the, it's interesting you mentioned Roswell there, Dave, because we had Kevin Randall on the show again a few months back.
Yes.
And Kevin is, of course, well known for his research and investigation into the Roswell case. And regarding the fact, what he'd done, he did like a review of these witnesses, and he said that, when you look at it now in today's light of day, they don't quite add up, and that evidence that Roswell was an alien crash is just out of your grasp. He believes it was, but the evidence is not quite as good as perhaps we'd first imagined, because a lot of it wasn't first hand, it was second and third hand. And of course today, I believe that everybody who was claimed to be a witness to anything at Roswell is now deceased. They've all gone. Yeah. So that was interesting. And regarding the cover-up, I've always said, well, why would they cover it up? What would be the reason for it? And what I did, I asked that same question to the main Roswell researchers, Stan Friedman, Kevin Randall, Don Schmidt, and so on. And they all came up with something different. Yeah. For me, in my own honest opinion, if it was an alien spaceship, they had to put the lid on it almost immediately, Dave, because, as you pointed out, the release, we've got a flying disc, and the next day, sorry, we made a mistake. Yeah. It was a balloon. What could it have been that would have, put the lid on it, and that they could recognize it? Bearing in mind, this is alien technology we're dealing with here. We can't, for example, we can't even talk to other species on our own planet, let alone we're saying that we're going to be able to understand a vehicle from another world.
I don't think they understood it. I mean, I'm sure that they spent years looking at it, and maybe even today don't fully understand it or know how it works.
There would have been something that made them put the lid on it straight away. I would have perhaps, in my opinion, would have done the opposite, because the Cold War was just about to begin. America at that point was the only country in the world that had atomic weapons, although the Russians were, in the developmental stages. Hence Project Mogul, which was what it was looking for. And I just think the propaganda that you could have got out of that at that time would have been immense. You could have gone wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You better not mess with us, because not only have we got our nukes, you want to see what these guys have brought to Earth. Unfortunately, they've crashed. But the first place they came wasn't the Soviet Union; it was the United States. I don't know. I don't know.
It's an interesting play. I just think there's so much to do with the actual bodies, not just the. Because Project Mogul wouldn't have had bodies, and there's the whole thing with the Roswell Hospital getting cordoned off, and the coroner and everything. There's a lot of, and there's a hell of a lot of witnesses who claim to have seen the bodies or secondhand heard them from other people, and this sort of thing. It felt to me too much to not be a part of it. And I know that the government, I know that they later on said it was crash test dummies and they were getting muddled up, but it's a very convenient cover. But happens so long ago.
It's an interesting place to visit, though, Dave.
I do want to go there. I want to go there big time.
I had the pleasure and the honour of lecturing there in 2007. We went out into the desert to the ranch and the crash site and so on, and wandered around. And it's still difficult to get to today, unless if you don't know where the place is. I can't imagine what it would have been like in 1947, especially when Mac Bradley didn't even have electricity on the ranch.
Have you got that yet in Pontefract, Phil?
We're working on it, mate. We're working on it.
Sorry.
This will make you laugh. We had up until recently the power station just up the road from here. Right, it's closed now. But we were forever getting power cuts.
Wow.
And the power station at Ferrybridge, you can see it. From the bottom of our street. It's closed now because it's coal-fired. But we used to get power cuts regularly. And I always found that amazing. We live just up the road from a power station. Yeah, we always get power cuts.
I'm gonna jump in here now, gentlemen, because we literally have we've got less than 4 minutes left of the show now. So, what's going on in the future then, Dave? What you got planned? What's coming up? What you're gonna be getting on with?
Yeah, well, obviously at the moment the BUFOG meetings, our usual monthly meetings, are postponed, although I might start up virtual meetings at some point shortly. I'm just looking into that at the moment. So we might start up some regular sort of meeting online.
Give out the BUFOG web address, please, mate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the website is www.bufog.com. And we've also got a Facebook community page, which is BUFOG Truth Seekers. and anybody can add themselves to the page. I'm the admin for it, so I'll let you in. And then on that, we discuss things regularly, and I'll keep everybody updated on all sorts of stuff. I've also been working, as I mentioned earlier on this new lecture on screen memories. I'm going to be giving that to a number of groups in the coming weeks, speaking at the Paranormal Online Festival, which is taking place next weekend. And I'm talking East Anglia UFO group. They started to do their virtual ones. I'm talking and giving it on Monday there. And also, aside from that, obviously working towards the promotion and eventual launch of UFO Wave. So in the coming weeks, I'll be doing some playtesting videos and releasing other aspects of the game in more depth via the UFO Wave website. And again, that's www.ufowavegame.com. And I'm still continuing with investigations. So even though we haven't got our meetings going on, I'm actively investigating the UFO subject still. It was just the other day I released a detailed repeat contact case from Wistaston, which is up in the northwest England, from a number of experiences of a gentleman which he'd had in childhood that happened summer of 1983, about 4 or 5 experiences in a row in quick succession. Very, very interesting case. So that report went out live recently, and I'm always working. I've always got about 5 cases on the go at any one time.
For those who also subscribe to Outer Limits magazine, in the last issue, which has just come out October the 1st, Dave has supplied a fantastic article in there about a close encounter with 12 different creatures coming at somebody, weren't they, Dave? So.
Yeah, it was a line of humanoid beings and an apparent crashed or landed craft. Yeah, an absolutely fascinating case, and that's part of a repeat contact case. The gentleman involved with that had about 50 other experiences, and they've all been fully documented again in the case report. So that there was a particularly interesting experience that he had, along with another independent witness. So very, very interesting.
Well, we've come to the end. So. And that was with an H at the beginning as well. We've come to an end. Dave Hodrien, Birmingham UFO group. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Very, very enjoyable.
No problem at all.
Thank you. That's from me and from Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Dave. Fascinated to hear about your research. I wish you every success with it. Same goes with UFO Wave card game. Like I said, I have already registered at the website. I look forward to it, and I will be supporting it to the best of my endeavours.
Great stuff.
And you know where we are if you ever need any assistance with anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Yeah, keep in touch, guys.
Thank you very much.
It's been an interesting chat. Thank you very much.
Inside Outer Limits is a regular feature on the Paranormal UK radio network.